Now we're going to shift a bit into how is the individual changing the way that they're working from home. What does that reopening look like? Unfortunately, I've had to go to several wakes and funerals over the last couple of weeks because as 100% Italian and as my grandfather has always told me, deaths come in threes. So when we're there, you're catching up and you're talking we started asking people, or I started asking people, because obviously you talk about the person who's passed away, but then you catch up and you try to distract people, and who doesn't talk about COVID when you see your friends? So we start talking about who is not going back to work, who is going back to work, what has been offered, how has COVID treated you and your family and going forward. And the resounding component has been, well, actually, I'm working from home permanently, or I'm now living in Ohio because I have the ability to, because my company doesn't want me back until October. And we're starting to see this more and more, which is why I created a small survey just to say, hey, you guys have been watching us, you guys have been reading our stuff, what's happening on your end? And we're getting more and more of my work from home has been extended, or I've been offered flexible schedule. And some friends of mine have been offered the ability to work from home permanently. And if anybody's ever taken the Long Island Railroad, that's a gift that you do not turn down, because the Long Island Railroad needs a stick of dynamite and then you just start over. So that's where we start to look at remote jobs and what are some of the best states for these remote jobs. And it's not surprising because obviously I'm in New York. My wife is from Rhode Island. We went up to Rhode Island for her grandfather passed away. And you can see that's where you have a decent opportunity to work from home. But when you start looking at the West Coast, when you look at the South and the East Coast, you see that there is a big option to work from home. That's looking at broadband speed. What is your ability from your job? Like, what is your job? Obviously, if you're working on an assembly line, putting things together, you're at work. If you're an accountant working for that company, are you at work? You look at Ford, 30,000 jobs going into remote. Those clearly aren't people that are on the assembly line. That's marketing, that's finance, that's accounting. Those are things that we continue to see kind of the shift. And that's why it's interesting to look at where are people moving, how are they moving, how much does the cost of living matter, which is why, the Carolinas, Texas, become an interesting point of reference. So let's look at that a little bit differently. Because Gen Z is more likely to say they've struggled at work at home, because let's be fair, if you're listening to someone as a Gen Xer, you're going to listen to a millennial or a Gen Z, and we all know how people feel about millennials. But, when you start to look at, who has more experience, and this is that detriment to work from home, because how are you training the new generation, the new class of individuals, which is why I don't think, obviously some things can work from home permanently, but the flex schedule becomes more appealing when you start to think about, well, you get the best of both worlds and you still limit the amount of travel. But most U.S. workers doing their job differently during the pandemic, 78% have said yes. This is something that has continued through March, and I don't see adjusting, which again leads us to that what we keep saying in the EIA show of driving in during the day, in the weekday versus weekend, is still not really changing all that much, given, I know for me, I have friends that have said that it's now July has become September has become October. Some people have been held to the July restart, and it's going to be interesting to see how does this progress as we go forward. Or do we get a small increase in cases and people say, you know what, let's just wait till there's more vaccinations. Let's wait till September and, give everyone the summer to get vaccinated and then come back. And then when you think about, okay, well, U.S. employees working remotely as a precaution is still 58%. And you can see we've held this line very closely for a long period of time, and it'll start to come down, but it's not going to come down in one straight shot. It's going to be that gradual move as some people go back, some people stay home. Then when we look at the desire of U.S. workers to continue working remotely continues to go up, and we're now at 26%. Depending on what data point you found, I have found 26%, 33%, 34%, 30%. So clearly we're in a pretty tight, where 30% or so of people want to stay working remotely, with about the same amount of companies saying that they'd be willing to do a work remote program, with over 80% of workers saying that they want a flex schedule, and about 70% of companies saying that they'd be willing to for a flex schedule. So again, it's going to be something meeting in the middle. But when we talk about jobs, Indeed is saying that we're now back above job postings. So seasonally adjusted from February 1st to March 19th, we now have 10.7% more job posts than we had prior. And when we keep talking about the different curves, the efficiency in the jobs market, this is where we keep talking about the problems with getting labor and whether you're making more on unemployment, so why would you get a job, or you're just don't have the right skills for the job available. And that's where we're continuing to see this. Some people have said, which one is it? And it's both. It's not one or the other. We're seeing the same issue crop up time and time again, which is also coming to the change in visits to U.S. workplaces from pre-pandemic baseline. So we're still not seeing anyone really hiring as aggressively, even though the job postings are out there, and you're still seeing people work from home. And this is the baseline of how nothing's really changed. And is it going to change in April? Is it going to change in May? I mean, even the most bullish data points I've seen is the answer is no, because most early individuals that are going back to the office have been June to July. Now, Texas is a little different, but Texas has always been different. Let's be fair. And then Florida is different. But again, these are the different components of where are people going back to the office. And I thought this was a good snapshot of lack of skilled labor despite job openings. So plumber apprentices, 29 days to fill. Roof apprentice, 39. I mean, you're looking at just how hard it is to get people to take these jobs. And this is where we see the job postings, but it's so difficult to get them filled. And now as people who want to, try to get into a situation of, remote work, well, you're going to have a bigger home and you're going to want to get out of an apartment. So again, this is the overhang that we keep talking about with jobs. But then when we look at existing home sales, so clearly they've come down, but going back to 2011, they're still really high. So this is not like we're not seeing growth in general. It's just, as we've been saying, that you're going to get a slowdown because how many 760 in credit scores are out there? How many of those haven't already bought a home? So again, you're getting this natural slowdown. Obviously, you had a weather event, but it's just you're not going to see this huge spike back in general. And then when we look at home affordability, speaking back to the commentary on, well, what's home affordability and can I work from home? Well, the Carolinas looks pretty good, and like Virginia is at 54%. So yes, it's a bit more affordable, and I have the ability to be away from that region. So this is when we start looking at what is the home affordability in the U.S., and then what is the opportunity to work from home. And so the medium new home price, you get an idea of kind of where it is. Obviously, nothing is cheap anymore because everybody wants more space, and the rates make it advantageous to do so. But you have to layer this in. So take this map and take the ability to work from home. So that's where we continue to see those shifts, and that's where you're getting some different individuals attracting out of New York, which is obviously, I know, shock to everyone on this watching us, isn't very affordable. So Virginia is, how are the Carolinas in comparison to New York? How is Ohio compared to New York? Again, these are things that we continue to see move down and have this opportunity to get into other areas. And now let's take this to a different level. Well, let's look at new home sale prices. There are no starter homes. Back when your parents, I know my parents, were buying homes, you're talking about $75,000. Where is their $75,000 home? well, clearly there's inflation, clearly there's price, but now there's also size. How many, I think there was some report out that, over the last 10 years, the average home has grown 400 square feet. Or, and I'm sorry, that's too much. It was like 175 square feet. But you're getting this expansion because people want more space. And if you're going to work from home more, you want your home office. But look at that 400,000 plus growth. This is where you continue to see the poor getting poorer, the middle class struggling because you don't have the starter home. If you can buy a home at 200,000, then you pay off some of your mortgage, you create equity, hopefully the home price goes up, then you sell for a premium and you buy a bigger home. And you go up this mobile move, but now you don't have that. I mean, the average home price in the US is $345,000. So anything 200 and lower is most likely getting torn down, rebuilt bigger, and then they're going to put a $450,000 price tag on it. And someone's going to buy it. And that's where you're getting this bifurcation that's only getting worse when you think of household wealth, income growth, social mobility, inequality. All of this is a big piece of that. So when the Fed tells you, well, we don't know why it's happening, maybe they need to watch my shows. I don't know, because clearly I'm seeing something they're not. So now let's take this to another level and let's look at the year-over-year rate of HPA. So HPA will further accelerate to about 14% by the time these home sales ultimately close in March and April. So clearly we are going in one general direction. Not surprising. So now let's look at the average mortgage application loan size. So the average mortgage is getting bigger because you can buy more home for a lower rate. So the refinancing side doesn't have to go anywhere because you've already bought off some of the equity, you've paid down some of your mortgage. So what do you're just refinancing to capture a lower rate. Why not? Well, the purchase side continues to grow, which is why as rates go up and the 30-year mortgage goes above 3%, you're going to start to see some of that pull back, especially because, lumber prices and all these other prices are going to be problematic for that continued growth. But U.S. existing home sale inventory still remains very low. And that's why permits and all of these other new construction continues to ratchet up. But how much of this home sale inventory is kind of fake because you just have people that haven't been evicted. You still have short sales that could come. Like, these are things where some of this is a bit inflated. But again, it's not. Let me be clear. It's not inflated to the point that we'd be back to zero. It's negative 20% instead of negative 30%. So again, it's just, putting it into context. So then when you look at existing home sale median price, you can see that the 15.8% growth is going to continue to see that rent go up. And again, this is going to be that push to the upside. And now banks are going to face a different struggle. Because U.S. bank reserves at the Fed ballooned last year, but now with the SLR and the adjustments, how is this going to move? The OEFR and all of these other type of great acronyms to try to help banks because they're not lending. Even though we have easy money, you're still seeing this hesitation, and all of this is sitting at the Fed. So if they push it into the market and you see an acceleration of the velocity of money, well, what does that mean on the back end of inflation, of some of this overheating of the economy that we've talked about in previous episodes? So then but on the positive side, when we look at U.S. small business sales have accelerated, they continue to push higher in general, specifically on total sales, as we see food, retail, services, all of them moving in the right direction, which as we get reopenings, as we get restaurants going from 25% capacity to 75% capacity, or just opening in general, you're going to have that natural move up, which is a net positive to see. But then when we look at the hotel uptick, this is where, so this is being quoted as a deflationary side, but how long will it be deflationary as we see, revenue coming up, people starting to get out again, and again, there's also a certain amount of seasonality as you can see with some of these spikes, there is spring break, there is this movement, and people feel freer to move about for spring break. But this will drive up average daily rates. This will push up revenue per room. And this is going to be kind of that net kind of tailwind to things that have been deflationary. It'll still be deflationary, just not to the same level, and very much bifurcated as to where. If you're trying to get someplace in Florida, good luck. If you're trying to get someplace in Texas, you could do it. But again, that's going to drive kind of the differences between the two. So then when we look at, well, will you require employees to vaccinate before returning to work? And the answer is no. So for the most part, the answer is a resounding no. So you won't have to wait for a vaccination. You'll just be, well, I feel better about it. So until it's available, I'm not going to go back. And most companies are like, that's cool. Like, that's fine. We want you to feel safe. But there really isn't any means of forcing anyone to get any kind of vaccination, as there's robust testing and there's a decline in cases. So this is not something I expect to change in general, but it will create an environment where people will try to milk this as long as possible, let's be fair, and work from home as long as possible until they're told to come back, or at least some sort of balance between the two. Then when we look at, typically BlackRock is a little look back in terms of their stuff, but this is just looking at U.S. employment following recessions. And clearly this is not a typical recession. If anybody's been watching our shows, that doesn't surprise you. It's just, that's why when we look at the recovery overall, given the depth and the reasons for the layoff, it's something that we think is going to continue to be a problem as we go through the remainder of the year. And when we look at extended benefits, you can see that we're still over, almost near about 18 to 20 million on the regular benefit side, converting into pandemic, extensive. And again, this is that net overhang that we continue to see. And then when we look at, do you plan on paying off your student loans? Well, if I keep hearing that it's going to get paid off, why am I paying anything towards it? So here you can see that 66%, no, I'm waiting for student loan forgiveness to pass. So do you plan on paying more student loans this year? No. So essentially you're going to pay the bare minimum waiting for some kind of forgiveness. 24% are paying off, 10%, but only interest payments. So clearly they're not even paying interest anymore. So this is why when you look at what does the delinquency rate look like, and this is going to force something to happen on that level, because clearly there is a wait and see approach on what is this going to look like going forward. So now that we've covered a lot of the US and roped in some of the different emerging market side, now we're going to turn to Europe at a greater scale and do a quick view of what is some of the things happening as COVID cases increase and as lockdowns get prolonged deeper into not only April, but actually into May. And what does that mean for some of that GDP and just general economic growth in the region?